And this parsha actually exemplifies so well the idea that one cannot just read the text, the pshat as it were, the text without learning the deeper midrashic and agadic meanings, because on the surface this parsha is full of it's the story of Rachel and Leah and Yaakov, and it's full of jealousy and bitterness and rivalries, and you on the surface that's what it is. You can't understand what's going on unless you really do look at the underneath story, as it were. So let me very briefly tell you what happens in this parsha. Yaakov leaves Beersheba and he goes towards Haran. To remember from last week, his mother Rivka tells him, "Go to my brother Lavan, and you'll find a wife from there." And he goes. He has on the way. He has a dream. He rests overnight at Har HaMoriah, the place where actually his father was nearly sacrificed. And he has a dream about the ladder with the angels going up and down. Well, the place Har HaMoriah. Har HaMoriah, the mountain of Moriah.
Okay, so in English they say Moriah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess they would, yeah. And Hashem tells him he's going to safeguard him and he'll return to Canaan safely. He continues his journey. He goes to Haran. He sees a well of water, and the shepherd's there. He rolls off this very, very heavy stone all by himself, and then he sees Rachel. Rachel is there. She's and it's clear to him that this is his cousin. This is Lavan's daughter, right? And she's tending her father's flocks, okay? And Rachel goes to tell her father about Yaakov. They go out and meet him. And then we're told that Lavan has two daughters. There's Rachel and there's Leah, right? And Yaakov loves Rachel and wants to marry her. And in exchange for this, he's going to work for Lavan for 7 years. That's the deal that they make. And so they do. But Lavan, the trickster, he will not have this. He wants 7 more years out of Yaakov because he knows that Yaakov is going to leave as soon as he marries Rachel. He wants Yaakov to stay, which we'll get into in a minute. He marries, so on the wedding night.
After 14 years or 7 years?
After 7 years.
Okay.
He switches the girls.
No.
He thinks he's marrying Rachel and he's married Leah.
In the beginning.
7 years in the beginning, and then he marries Leah. Thinks it's Rachel. Wakes up in the morning, behold, it's Leah. Then he's very upset, of course, and he agrees to work another 7 years. We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. Don't feel too bad for her because she makes out pretty well with all the children that she has. Right? She was the mother of most of the tribes. We'll get to her in a minute. So so he gives another 7 years of service for Rachel, and then he ends up marrying both of them. Right? Episode of the Dudaim. The plants that Reuven picks for his mother Leah. We'll get into that. And then Yaakov wants to leave, and Hashem says it's now time to leave. He consults with his wives. They agree that Hashem said to leave, so we're going to leave. And Lavan, of course, is not going to like this, so they end up having to sneak away in the middle of the night. And Lavan chases after him and says, "How could you do this to me?" And they finally come to some sort of treaty, and then Yaakov continues on his way. So that's basically the overview of the parsha.
Wait, he sneaks away with Rachel?
Mm-hmm, with his whole family, with Rachel, with Leah, with all his children. He had all his children at that point, except even Yosef at that point, I think, was born. And I think Rachel was pregnant with. Okay, so that's the story. So let's go back and now look at a couple of choice events and see if we can understand it a little bit deeper from the Mefarshim Midrashim. Yaakov meets Rachel at the well, and he sees that she's leading her father's sheep. Okay, so Rachel herself was a shepherdess, and Leah was not a shepherdess. And the reason why is that there's a few explanations for this. Rachel was very young. Some say as young as 5, as old as maybe 14, and she was too young to be interested in the boy. So it was safe to send her out of the village, let's say, to do the shepherding. Whereas Leah was older and she was of marriageable age, maybe, even though there's an opinion that says they're twins. We'll get into that in a minute. And so Rachel, she was also very very good at it. All right. So Yaakov sees Rachel, and the pasuk says, daughter of Lavan, his mother's brother. Okay, shepherding the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother, and watering the sheep of Lavan, his mother's brother. So 3 times in that pasuk, it repeats the phrase his mother's brother, and this comes to tell us that his actions vis-a-vis Rachel and his love of her was not due to her beauty or feelings of lust, but that everything that he did was for his mother's sake. In other words, when he comes to the well and he is so overcome with emotion and he's weeping, it's partly because this is he's been traveling for 14 years, because when he left Israel to come to Haran, he made a pit stop. He sort of made a detour and stayed at the yeshiva of Aver for 14 years. So he's been traveling for a long time, and he makes it finally he makes it. And think about his history here. He had to have a little resentment towards him. His mother, he's very close to. He's going by, he didn't want to leave. This is he's following his mother's advice and order. And he is very, he's lost, he's forlorn. And then he comes and he sees his mother's niece, Rachel, and he's very overcome. So that was the point of the pasuk that Hirsch says, that he was, that's why he kisses her. Right? So Rachel, for this to be an issue halachically, so we don't have to worry about that. And then he weeps. So he kisses her and then he weeps. And there's a lot of different commentaries that explain the weeping. And as I said, one of the sort of the more, I guess you could say, surface explanations is, here he is coming from traveling tremendous amount of time, and he's just so happy to see a relative that he knows, or that he's going to be close to, that he is close to, in a relative. Saw that she was not going to be buried with him. In other words, he foresaw that this, right away he saw, this is my zivug, this is my partner. There was something spiritual about her. There was something spiritual that he grasped from divine intuition or divine inspiration, that he knew this is the one for him. But he foresaw that she wouldn't be buried with him, and that hurt him. That was very painful. And of course, we're going to say later how she was buried along the highway. Deliberately at the point where the Jews, when the first temple was destroyed, they were exiled and they walked past Rachel's tomb. So she was specifically put there for, as a way of allowing the children of Bnei Israel to pray at her tomb. And then we're going to get into
So this was the path to what?
When the Jews were exiled after the destruction of the first temple, they passed by the place of Rachel's tomb, and they stopped and prayed to her that she should intercede with God on their behalf. And we're going to see that based on Rachel's action in this parsha, she merited having Hashem heed her prayers more than any other foremother. We'll get into that later. Okay, but anyway, so she foresaw that she wouldn't be buried with him. Another reason that he was upset is he came empty-handed, right? So he must have thought of Eliezer, his grandfather's servant, the servant who came to look for his mother, for his father, for a wife, right? He found Rivka, but he came laden. He had 10 camels that were laden with jewelry and gifts and things like that. And here he had nothing with him, either because, we could say, there's actually 2 reasons for this. Either because after 14 years at the yeshiva, he didn't have anything with him. But there's a medrash that says, and another reason here, medrash says that when Yaakov left Beersheba, Esav instructed his son Eliphaz to chase after Yaakov and to kill him. Okay, because Esav was furious at this point, and he wanted.
After 14 years.
No, right away when Yaakov first left.
Okay,
Yeah.
where's the yeshiva?
Where was it?
Where's
It was.
the city? I forgot.
I can't remember the name.
Oh, okay.
Where the city was, I don't know, but it was in
He was on the run,
Canaan.
so he had nothing. He didn't grab anything.
Well, he had. This is the point. He had taken stuff with him, right? He had taken money and he'd taken probably gifts. I mean, Rivka knew that he was headed toward her brother's house.
Right.
She gave him things to give to Lavan. But what happened was when Eliphaz, on the orders of his father Esav, goes out to follow his father's order and kill Yaakov. But Eliphaz has a little bit of Yitzchak in him. He's a little bit of a tzaddik. He doesn't want to kill his uncle. And he tells Yaakov when he meets up with him, says, I was ordered to kill you. I don't know what to do. I don't want to kill you. So Yaakov said, take everything I have, because a poor man is considered a dead man. And so he did. That's what he did. He robbed Yaakov of all he had, and therefore he came with nothing. And then Eliphaz was able to go back home to Esav and say, I don't know what he told Esav at that point. I guess Esav learned that Yaakov was at Lavan's house. So, okay, another Meforish, Sforno, says that he cried when he met her at the thought that he had not merited to marry her in his youth. Like the time that he had missed with her, that he could have had children already with her.
She was 5 or 5 and 16.
I think
That's a little bit.
I think the regret is that he was so old, not that she. Like that he at this point he's about 70, something like that. I think he marries her at about 84, 83, 84. So yeah. Okay. And again, okay, so that's Yaakov meeting Rachel. Means so various meanings of the name Rachel. One is it's a reference to sheep because she's named for her skill with the sheep. She's a shepherdess. Alternatively, the Alkut Reuveni says it's a contraction meaning filled with divine spirit, Ruach El. Leah is named for a few reasons. Leah's name, the Midrash says that her name it references being weary, tired, and this is because it's an allusion to her weariness. In a minute, okay. So another interpretation is that her name means Malaya. She was full. Malay means full, meaning she was full of wisdom and knowledge. Okay, so the sisters, they were twins. Is the established understanding.
Really?
Leah was the elder.
They were the same age. I thought Leah was a lot older.
Again, that's one reading of it. We have the saying, and when we learn Torah, we have the saying that there are 70 faces of Torah. In other words, we have situations where you can have one commentary contradicting the other commentary.
Okay.
That's possible. So. According to the established, Leah was the elder, and actually it'll be important to, the Midrash says they were twins, and we'll see in a second why that's important. Leah was the elder, born when Yaakov received the blessings. So again, their age at their marriage was about 21. They would be about 14 years old. What?
You mean like at that moment?
At the moment, I don't know about that moment, but the implication is that Yaakov receives the bracha. And then Yitzchak with the bracha is putting into action the plan for the rest of Yaakov's life, right? He's going to marry these girls. Okay, so the sisters are described as the greater, one is greater and one is smaller. Okay, and they're also contrasted in terms of their looks. The pasuk says that Leah's eyes were tender, and Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. And we have to understand what this means, because on the surface, it seems like there's a disparagement of Leah to the detriment of Leah, that Rachel is described as beautiful, to contrasting her. And we're not to understand that Rachel was the pretty one and Leah was the ugly one. That's not the meaning here. Because as one of the Midrashim say, would the Torah speak disparagingly of a righteous person? No. Casting arukot, meaning the word tender. The word that is used to mean tender, arukot, is a reference to her gifts. Okay, so we're not, the Mefarshim all say, this is not a matter of saying that Leah was ugly while Rachel was pretty, right? So, Rachel had this, she was much more, some people are beautiful when you first see them, like striking. Rachel was striking, and it also has a double language here. She was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance, right? Social beauty that matched it. She was overall just a very lovely girl, all right? Leah's eyes were tender, so the meaning is she's not as obviously pretty, let's say, right? She has a deeper or more subtle beauty, okay? Leah comes from the word, again, another meaning of her name is hidden. And, so she had more hidden beauty. Now, again, Leah is called Hagedola, she's the greater. And the Mefarshim say that means that she was greater in the gifts granted to her offspring. Because Leah, of course, first of all, she had more of the tribes. She had more of the sons of Yaakov, right? But in addition to that, she outranked Rachel. Rachel had 2, right? But she also Leah had Levi and Yehuda. So what did she get from Levi? Levi is the kahuna, the priesthood. So her children were, from Yehuda came the kingship, David and the line of kings. So she had priesthood and royalty. And that's
Levi and Yehuda.
From Levi you had the priesthood, and from Yehuda you had the kingship. So Rachel was a smaller sister in her gifts. She had Yosef. Yosef was the premier of Egypt. You have Shaul, who was the first king of the Jewish people, and he reigned for a short time. So Rachel's gifts were smaller than Leah's. Now let's get to Leah's eyes. It says that her eyes were. So the Midrashim tell us that they were soft from weeping. She would cry and weep and just pray all day because she thought, and it was like sort of established, like it was understood, that she would be destined to marry Esav. Why? Simple logic. And in certain places of the world, and even now, I guess, it was very common to marry within families because, it's an established, family, you know who it is, and there's loyalty. Even among royalty, they especially do that, right? So people would say, okay, Rivka has 2 sons, and Lavan has two daughters, so therefore the older one would marry the older one. So Leah would marry Esav, and then Rachel would marry Yaakov. So in this way, Leah would weep because she knew that Esav was not a fitting partner. He was an evil, a hunter. His deeds were known far and wide, and she didn't want to marry him. So she sort of pounded at the gates of heaven with her tears. She actually did overturn that decree with the power of her prayer and her tears. She overturned the decree. She used to weep, according to Midrash, may it be your will that I do not fall to the lot of that wicked man. And Reb Huna comments, great is the prayer that it annulled the decree. And she even took precedent because she so much did not want to marry Esav, wanted to marry a righteous man. The decree was overturned, and she was the first one to marry Yaakov, and she bore most of his children. So she merited decree. And Leah is talked about, and I'll talk about this later on. She's the paradigm of prayer. She's like the first, and even so much that the Gemara later says in regard to when she names Yehuda. It says that nobody thanked Hashem until Leah thanked Hashem. Okay, we'll talk about that later. So she's the paradigm of the power of prayer. It's a great, it's actually a very, it's a great contrast also later to what happens to Rachel. We'll talk about that. Okay, so now, so the commentators say that again, so we're to understand the point of the pasuk and telling about her eyes being weak is we're understand it's not a physical blemish they're pointing out. It's pointing out something as a pain to her spiritual greatness, right? This is meant to her that her eyes were weak from weeping, and again, it's a comparison of good qualities. Right, she had soft eyes, tender eyes, and Rachel was overall beautiful, but it's not meant to be a reductive contrast for Leah. Okay. For either one, right. Okay, so now we're told, the pasuk goes on to say that Yaakov loves Rachel. Okay, he loves Rachel. And again, as I said before, it's because that he foresaw that she was his preordained wife. Now, Leah, by the way, ordained to marry Yaakov. As we just said, she changed the decree of heaven, right? And in fact, the Zohar says that had he met Leah first, he wouldn't have shown an interest in Rachel, right? So there. Okay, so he asks to marry Rachel in exchange for a servitude period of 7 years, right? And Rashi says, why did he obligate himself so long, right? If you want to marry somebody, you say. So first of all, again, she was young at this. By the oldest count would be maybe 13 or 14, the marriageable age at that point, but she was young. Rashi says that based on Rivka's instruction, Rivka instructed him to go and stay a few days by Lavan. Now, the trip to Haran probably took about a year, so she couldn't have actually meant only a few days. But at that point, the Torah talks about, so very often refers to years as days, and so he understood that Rivka's instructions were stay a few years. Another commentator says that's how much regard he had for her. In other words, he thought she was worth 7 years of labor. That's how much regard he had for her. Okay. Also, because it was common knowledge, and it's going back to Leah and Esav, because it was common knowledge that Esav would marry Leah, he was waiting for that to happen. He was waiting for Esav to come and claim Leah. In other words, that's the right order of things. The older one marries first. Mm-hmm. But also, he didn't want to marry, he asked for Rachel because he figured if Esav is destined to marry Leah, the last thing I need is to take something else of Esav's that he can claim, you stole my birthright, you stole my bracha, now you're stealing. He wanted to, so that's why he chose Rachel. Okay. All right, so the marriage, let's talk about the wedding. Let's talk about the marriage of Yaakov to Leah, and then a week later to Rachel. All right. Now, it was Lavan's intention, as we said, to trick Yaakov into staying. Yaakov was very, very explicit when he approached Lavan. He said, I want to marry Rachel, your younger daughter. Like, the language is very clear because Lavan is a trickster. So he was laying it out. I'm going to marry Rachel. She's your younger daughter. This one, right? That's the one I want. And, but Lavan was a trickster. Now, he wanted Yaakov to stay another 7 years. Why? Because Yaakov, as soon as Yaakov came and settled down, right? He first stayed for about a month, and then he made this agreement, this deal. The economy, when he started working for Lavan's financial situation improved tremendously. His flocks started growing. Yaakov had tremendous success in the financial area for Lavan. In addition, it says that the wells that had been stopped up or not flowing started flowing, and they all knew it was because of Yaakov's his merit, right? So the Haranite economy in general had improved. Lavan's own personal wealth had expanded, so he definitely wanted him to stay. Now, he did a few things at the wedding to trick Yaakov. Setting up this elaborate plan where he was going to switch Rachel with Leah, right? But what did he do? First of all, the pasuk says there was a feast with wine. The wine was intentional. Lavan wanted to try to get Yaakov drunk, a little cloudy, he wouldn't notice as much as he should notice, right? Okay. Another thing that he did was he invited a lot of people. It was a tremendous feast. And so Yaakov might be sort of tricked into thinking that, with so many people here, obviously nothing is going to be, it's not like this is a major event. Obviously people know it's going to be the real thing, but also he was thinking that if so many people were there at the wedding, then after, if Yaakov would discover the deception, he would be embarrassed to make a big deal in front of all these people. And one more thing he did that was very tricky. So Lavan had two other, some say daughters by concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. These were the maidservants of Rachel and Leah, and they were presented to them as gifts, to Rachel and Leah as gifts, right? I'm presenting them a servant to you. Now, typically it would it would make her daughter. Lavan deliberately gave Zilpah, the younger maidservant, to Leah under the chuppah or at the wedding ceremony, to again make Yaakov think this must be the younger daughter because this is the younger maid. So it was another element of the trick. Okay, so let's talk about what happened. We're getting into discussion of what these girls, were like, what the merits of the two women. So what happens? The marriage takes place. They have a chuppah, they have a wedding feast, and then consummation. And the pasuk says that at night, Yaakov, consummated the wedding. It was dark. They were quiet. It was nighttime. Leah's brought to him. They consummate. The next morning, Yaakov wakes up. Behold, it's Leah. Okay, so by the way, the language of the pasuk is interesting. It says Lavan took Leah's daughter. The implication is she really didn't want any part of the deception, right? Okay, so let's talk about the signs, right? So what happened was when Yaakov and Rachel got engaged, when they were betrothed to each other, they knew they were dealing with a trickster. They knew that he was going to try to pull something. So Rachel and Yaakov, arranged between them some sort of system of signals or signs. I don't know if they were verbal or if they were, something with gestures. I think it might have been a word, could have been a hand gesture, something. They said, okay, under the chuppah, I'm going to do this, and then if you do that back, I'll know it's you. Right? So only they two would know these signs, and that would be the way that Yaakov was sure that he was marrying Rachel. Okay. Rachel comes that night, comes at that time for the wedding, and Lavan shows, he says, Leah, it's going to be you. Rachel, at this point, could easily have said, look, she's waited 7 years, right? She knows Yaakov is a tzaddik. She knows she wants to marry him. Maybe she even has, as the Mefarshim say, Ruach HaKodesh, heavenly inspiration to know that she is meant to be with him, right? And she could have easily have just let things go, get to under the chuppah, let things proceed. Yaakov gives Leah the sign, Leah back, or answers something else. Leah is exposed, Lavan is exposed, and things are corrected. They switch Rachel in, she gets married to him, or the next day they have a different thing. She would have been totally within her rights to do that, right? Totally within her rights to do that. And instead, she says to herself, I know I've been waiting for 7 years for this moment, but I cannot let my sister be humiliated under the chuppah. I can't let that happen. And so what does she do? She tells Leah the signals. She tells Leah the signals. And then as a result of that, when Yaakov gives Leah the signals under the chuppah, she gives the right ones back, and they get married, they consummate, and then in the morning, surprises Leah. So this is an amazing thing that Rachel did, right? So the Midrash tells us how amazing this act that Rachel did was, how selfless it was. The Midrash says it was when the temple was destroyed, the first temple, right? And Bnei Israel were exiled. All of the patriarchs and Moshe came to Hashem in Shemayim, right? And they pleaded with Hashem to have compassion on the Jewish people, on their children, in the merit of what each of them had done, right? In other words, for example, Abraham came to Hashem and said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I almost sacrificed my oldest and only son, not only, but not even my oldest, my precious son, that the one that was going to be the inheritor of my mission. I was ready to sacrifice him for you. Because of my compassion, you should have compassion on my son, on our children. And Hashem was quiet, the Midrash says. Then Yitzchak comes and says, I was willing to give my life for you. Please have compassion on Bnei Israel. Hashem is quiet. Yaakov comes forward and says, I was in danger of my life. Esav wanted to kill me. Hashem is quiet. Then Moshe also comes and says, I was a shepherd of your children for 40 years, and then you didn't allow me to go into Eretz Yisrael. I couldn't, please have compassion. Nothing. Then Rachel steps forward. And according to Midrash, quote, she says to Hashem, she says, I suppressed my desire and had pity upon my sister that she should not be exposed to shame. In the evening they substituted my sister for me with my husband, and I delivered over to my sister all the signs which I had arranged with my husband, so that he should think she was Rachel. More than that, listen to this one, more than that, I went under the bed upon which he lay with my sister, and when he spoke to her, she remained silent, and I made all the replies in order that he should not recognize my sister's voice.
Whoa. What?
That's from the Midrash. Continuing, I did her. What?
It's kind of kinky. Oh my God.
Yeah. So she continues, I did her a kindness and was not jealous of her and did not expose her to shame.
Jeez.
That's from Midrash Rabbah. And so then she continues, she says, if I, a creature of flesh and blood, formed of dust and ashes, was not envious of my rival and did not expose her to shame and contempt, why should you, a king who lives eternally and is merciful, be jealous of vain idolatry and exile my children? In other words, talking to Hashem, right? I am a creature of flesh and blood. It was hard, sure, it's hard for me to do. It was very difficult for me to do because I have human desires and human emotions and anger, etc. And I wasn't jealous of her. You're the King of Kings. How could you be jealous of stupid little idols? In other words, the punishment of the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed and the Jews being exiled was because they were idolaters. And the king had set up idols in the temple. And so immediately, the Midrash says, immediately Hashem's mercy was stirred, and he said, for your sake, Rachel, I will restore Israel to their place. And so it is written in Yirmiyahu, a voice is heard in the upper spheres, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be consoled for her children, for they are gone. And Hashem answers, withhold your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, your deeds shall be rewarded, and there's hope for the future. So it was her action that, according to Midrash, was so powerful a merit that in her merit the Jews were recalled from their exile, and Hashem had compassion on them. I saw an interesting commentary that said, why was her sacrifice so great? It's because she wasn't commanded to it. In other words, we said, do you want me to wait?
No.
We said that had Rachel disrupted the wedding, she would have totally been in her rights, right? Had she disrupted the wedding, she wouldn't have been blamed for Leah's embarrassment, right? Saving Leah the embarrassment was certainly within her power, but had she not saved Leah from the embarrassment, she wouldn't have been blamed, right? It's Laban's fault. Laban was the trickster. Laban was the one that did this. And even so, she took the initiative to go beyond her obligations, right? And that's why her argument to God is so powerful, right? Because according to halacha, according to judgment, according to strict, the value of judgment, she could have been in her rights to say, stop the wedding, there's something wrong, right? That's why when she argues with God, yes, according to halacha, according to judgment, you can judge Bnei Yisrael strictly. But I went beyond judgment, she said to God. I went above and beyond what I had to do. And so therefore, that's a powerful argument to God. You can certainly go above and beyond what you should do by punishing Bnei Yisrael or by being so harsh on them. And that's why it's so powerful. And furthermore, there's an article here that I read that's very interesting, connecting Rachel, her meritorious action, earned her Shaul and earned her Esther. So remember we talked about a connection between Sarah and Esther? So here's a connection between Rachel and Esther. So the Gemara says, as a reward for the tznius with which Rachel displayed, she merited to have Shaul descend from her. And as a reward for the tznius that Shaul displayed, he merited to have Esther descend from him. So the tznius is obviously in this action of, not making a big scene, not making a stink, not complaining, quietly giving Leah the necessary tools for her to stay modest and quiet and not exposed. Right. So then her descendants. So then in merit of that, Rachel merited having Shaul. Shaul, he had an incident of modesty, tznius, when he was asked. He's appointed by Shmuel as the king, but he's told not to say anything, and his uncle asks him about like. Well, he was anointed. He was not quite officially anointed yet, right? Oh. What happened was that he was told by Shmuel he was going to be king, but he was not. It wasn't announced yet. And at one point, Shaul's uncle is suspecting something. Here's Shmuel Hanavi, the great prophet. Who is the uncle? Shaul, his uncle. I don't know the name of the uncle. I don't remember. Okay. But Shaul's uncle is suspecting something, and he sort of asks him about it, what's going on, and Shaul gives a very vague reply. In other words, at that point, he could have easily come out and said, "You got to hear this. I'm going to be the king of Israel, woo!" But he doesn't. He's quiet, and he shuts his mouth. Who? He's quiet, and he waits. No. You being serious?
Saul's uncle.
No, he didn't want the job. He was just curious to know what's going on. He's saying, what's going on? Shmuel's here, and Shmuel doesn't. Shmuel was a great prophet, and so he was quiet. He was quiet, and then Esther. So what was Esther's tznius moment? She didn't tell Achashverosh that she was Jewish. All right, and this was a benefit. It's meritorious for her, because she really sacrificed at that point when she was when she could have saved her life, right? At the point when Haman gives the decree that the Jews will be killed, she could have made it easy for her. She could have, Achashverosh was constantly on her to say, where are your people from? And she doesn't. And it would have made things a lot easier for her, but she doesn't speak.
Why is it tznius?
It's tznius because tznius is not talked about many times. Tznius is also in actions, and it refers to sometimes being quiet, on the quiet side when you want to speak.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I think that, the greatness of all of these actions, in my opinion, is that there was a self-nullification that happened in all of them. It wasn't just a matter of tznius, but think about it. They were all points at which they could have aggrandized themselves, right? Rachel could have said, I'm really the wife. I'm the true wife. It's not her, it's me. Right, and brought the spotlight to herself. Shaul could have easily have done the same thing. The temptation probably was great to do that. I'm the king. And Esther also, would have been raised in Achashverosh's estimation had she come clean and said who she was. And they all decided to sort of nullify their own ego. Right? They tamped down on their own ego for the bigger picture, for the greater good. And I think that's what was at issue here with Rachel. Rachel did that as well. Okay, so now let's move on. Any questions? Any comments? It was a very amazing thing that she did. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay, now let's talk about, let me go on in the Parsha, and it says that Yaakov had a love, he says Yaakov loved Rachel even more than Leah. Okay, so again, it's a moment at which we could say, aha, rivalry, jealousy, wifely rivalry here. By the way, so of course, what happens in between here is that he does end up marrying Rachel a week later after he marries Leah. Then he marries Rachel, and then the idea is that he's going to work for love an additional 7 years. Okay, so he loved Rachel even more than Leah. So the Torah mentions this because it's common for a man to feel more love for the woman with whom he lived first. That's according to the commentaries, meaning he lived with Leah first. But even though the surface meaning is, even though he lived with Leah first, he loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. Okay.
He loved Rachel first, too.
He saw her first, right.
I mean,
He saw her first.
she was his first pick.
Right, that's
so-
true. Right. Okay. Now, they understand that the understanding of the pasuk is not that he didn't love Leah. He loved Leah as well as Rachel, right? That he wasn't. He loved Leah and he loved Rachel too. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev has a different meaning here. Because it says the pasuk uses the word gam, even, extra, also. That Yaakov loved Rachel more because she brought with her Leah, the saintly one. That's what the commentary says. So again, it's not to disparage Leah. It means that his emotions, and I'm going to explain this a little bit at the very end if we have time, that Yaakov, for whatever reason, saw Rachel as his true mate, right? But he still did love Leah because he didn't hold the deception against her, right? But at the same token, we have the next pasuk, the next few pasukim. It says Hashem saw that Leah was unloved, right? So what does this mean? What does it mean that she was unloved? That he didn't love her? It can't mean that he didn't love her, because in the pasuk before we see he loved Leah. He loved Rachel even more than Leah, meaning he did love Leah. So clearly the pasuk cannot mean Yaakov hated Leah. So what does the pasuk mean? That Hashem saw she was unloved? So a surface meaning is in a comparative way. He loves Rachel more than Leah. So therefore Leah is the less loved than Rachel. But it's also interesting because the pasuk says Hashem perceived Leah was unloved, meaning the commentators say Leah didn't perceive it herself. Yaakov was such a good husband that even though his emotional home was with Rachel, he'd never let Leah feel that she was unloved or that she was less loved. He fulfilled his obligations to her. Physical, I'm sure, emotional, I'm sure, all of it. He was a good husband to her. It's not that he scorned her or treated her badly or treated her less well than Rachel. So that's why it says Hashem perceived. Only Hashem perceived. She didn't perceive it. Okay. Okay.
Wait a minute. Hashem saw that, only Hashem.
Yeah. That Leah herself did not perceive it. And so therefore, because Hashem saw that she was unloved, he opens her womb. He gives her children. She has a child. So the Malbim says that Leah was destined to be the barren sister. But because she was unloved, because she was less loved, Yaakov wouldn't have prayed for her to have children. Remember what we said about why did God make the foremothers and forefathers barren? What was the reason? Do you remember? So that they would pray.
Yeah.
But if Yaakov wasn't going to pray for Leah, then why make her barren? So that's what the Malbim says, that's why she was given children. Now, one more commentary from, who is this from? I think this is the Midrash. It was written, God saw that Leah was hated. What does hated mean here? The Torah did not speak disparagingly of an unclean animal. Would it speak disparagingly of a righteous person? In other words, the Midrash is coming to say, what does it mean? Can it possibly mean to say that Leah was not loved? The Torah doesn't even talk about an unclean animal, right, in a disparaging way. Certainly, when it comes to a tzaddikas like Leah, it's not going to say, oh, she was unloved. So what does it mean? The Holy Blessed One saw that Esav's deeds were hated by Leah, by her. Esav's deeds were hated. She was, in other words, switching the verb hate to the active meaning that Leah hated Esav's deeds. And that's why he opened her womb.
Wait, and we're back to Esav? I missed something.
Yeah, you remember when we said that Leah hated the idea of marrying Esav? Right. So it's a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a gymnastics we have to do here, a little bit of acrobatics. But what they're saying the pasuk means is that not that she was hated, but that she hated. And it's because she hated Esav and his deeds, his evil deeds, that's why she merited having her womb opened before her sisters. In other words, why she merited having a child at this point. Remember, the commentaries praise her tremendously for weeping and praying that she shouldn't marry Esav. What's the difficulty here?
I don't know. I'm just
Okay, here's my difficulty.
Yeah.
So what's the point? The words were that she was less loved, that Leah was unloved.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't say anything about that she was hated, she was unloved, or why would Hashem say that he saw that Leah was unloved when he really meant that she did not love Esau? It's a little screwed up to me.
It's a little bit of acrobatics, but the midrashim the commentators are trying to turn what seems like a negative in the pasuk, saying that she's not loved or she's scorned by Yaakov, or trying to turn that into a praise of her. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to turn the pasuk into a praise of her. In other words, again, we're not to understand, we're not to accept the idea that she was that there was something wrong with her, or that there was something unlovable about her. That's all. They were just trying to come to praise Leah, just the same as they did when they said her eyes were weak, her eyes were soft. It was a praise of her because it came to show how righteous she was and how she didn't want to marry Esav. Here too, this is a praise of her. That's it.
I find that
Okay,
very weird.
it's a stretch for you.
It's a stretch. Because
Okay.
I would say, Reverend said, it would seem that, okay, she was unloved, but that, Yaakov was more hot. This is really a gross way to put it. It was more hot for Rachel than Leah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say.
He's
That's
a physical guy.
right.
And Hashem perceived that there was more of a desire on Yaakov's part for Rachel than Leah.
No, for sure. That's certainly what we can understand from it too. In other words, Hashem wanted Yaakov's attentions to turn towards Leah. And what better way to do this than to make her the mother of his first child, right?
So all that makes sense to me. So then why do we have this whole thing about Esav? Why couldn't Hashem just give her a child because he perceived that she was unlovable, even though she didn't feel that she was?
And that's the plain meaning of the text.
Okay.
That's the plain meaning of the text, and that's certainly how we're to understand it. But the Midrash is going deeper. And saying, how could you possibly say that she was how could you possibly say that she was unloved? And then it's again trying to say it can't possibly mean that Leah was not loved or loved. It's again really going out of its way to say this has to be a praise of Leah.
So
she's a tzaddikas.
That she hated the bad guy.
Of course, yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Right. That it's a reward for her righteousness in hating Esav is that she was zocha, she merited to have his first children.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Maybe didn't make that clear. Okay.
Not as deep as
No, it's fine. Okay. So now Rachel, in the pasuk it says that Rachel is barren, right? Leah is the one that has the children.
That was a better explanation.
Okay, sorry. I'll have to make sure I remember that one. Okay. So Rachel is barren, and she becomes envious of her sister. So we again have to look a little bit deeper. What does this mean? This was Rachel. What did we just say she did? She gave up her husband to her sister.
Right.
You can now tell me that she was jealous of Leah, that she had a child. It can't be.
Right.
So the Medrash says that her envy was correct because she envied Leah's good treats, saying to herself, if Leah had not been more righteous than I, then I would have, then she would not have deserved to bear children. First, I would. In other words, she's what she says is correct. What she's feeling is a jealousy of Leah's good deeds, her righteousness. She fully understood that the fact that Leah had children first indicated that Leah was the better sister. Leah was the more meritorious sister. And that's what the Medrash says, that she's totally in her right. Her envy was laudable because she envied. We're allowed to envy someone's good deeds. We're allowed to say, oh, I wish I was such a Talmud Chacham. I'm so jealous that he can do that and I can't do it. We're allowed to do that. And so that's what she did.
So you're saying it's a different kind of jealousy.
It's not a jealousy of the child or jealousy of being a mother. It was a jealousy of her status, her righteousness, that I wish I was so righteous like her because then I could also have a child. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, Rachel then, look, she is a tzaddikus, but she's human too. And she gets angry. And she goes to Yaakov in the pasuk and she says, give me children, otherwise I'm dead. She's angry with him. Why is she angry with him? The commentators say that she attributed her barrenness to Yaakov's failure to pray for her enough. Not that he didn't pray for her, but that she goes back and she sort of brings his father into it. She says, your father, Yitzchak, prayed for Rivka. The Medrash tells us, gives us the behind-the-scenes conversation between the two of them. Quote, did your father act this way towards your mother? Did he not pray on her behalf? Okay, so she was saying, he prayed for her. Why don't you pray for me? And he was successful. Something you're not doing right. You should be wearing sackcloth and ashes. You should fast. She wanted children. And she figured the matter was up to him because he's no less of a righteous person than his father was. Right? And otherwise I'm dead. What does that mean, right? If you don't pray and give me children, it's like I'm dead. She was trying to, the Ramban says, she's trying to frighten him into, I'm going to die of grief if I don't have children. And that would frighten him because she knows he loves her. From this, by the way, we learn that if someone who doesn't have children is considered as they're not alive, that they're dead because they don't have a legacy. But Yaakov explained to her, apparently, that it's only the wicked people that are regarded as not being alive if they don't have children, because the good people have their righteous deeds that live on after them. So he becomes very angry. Yaakov becomes very angry with her. And he says, I can't give you children. It's not up to me to give you children. Am I God? He says, quote, am I instead of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? That's the pasuk. Right? He gets angry with her. So, mainly because the implication is from her, you have the power to grant this. Right? Had she come and said, please pray on my behalf, it would be something else. But here she's coming and saying, you give me children. It's your power to do it. And he was trying to say to her, it's Hashem's power. It's not my power.
Right. Don't blame this on me.
Don't blame me. In addition, he's a little bit...
Don't you think she had a little bit of a point if he would with his whole heart and soul pray for her?
Oh, so that's a good point. That's a very good point. And I'm going to come back to it in a minute at the end of this little thing. But he's a little bit cruel to her. He's a little bit cold. He says, am I instead of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? In other words, why do you complain to me? I'm not the one who's withheld children from you because I'm not barren. He says, meaning Leah has children. Right. I'm not barren. You're barren. It's a little bit harsh, right?
Very
so
harsh.
The Midrash says that they continue the conversation. He says to her, you say I am like my father, but he had no children at all. So the prayer for himself was effective because he was praying on his behalf, right? So undoubtedly he had prayed for her, but obviously the prayer had gone unanswered. So again, his admonishment to her was, you're the one that has to pray for yourself, right? And the result, according to the Ramban, okay, the text actually says, and God listened to her. When Hashem gives her children, it says, Hashem listened to her, meaning that Rachel must have gone and prayed on her own behalf, right? So thus we see that the prayers of someone who is desirous of something, they're really more powerful than if I would go to somebody else and say, pray on my behalf, right? And we learn that also in the story of Hannah. Elkanah, her husband, doesn't pray on her behalf because he already had children through Penina. So it's a much more powerful thing. If I am going to pray on my behalf, look at Leah, right? Leah, her tears were just from the bottom of her soul. She did not want to marry Esav, and she changed the decree. And here as well, Hashem listened to Rachel, meaning she must have accepted the criticism from Yaakov. I have to pray on my behalf. And she does pray on her behalf, and Hashem gives her. Yeah. Now, the sages take Yaakov to task for his cruelty a little bit. They say, Midrash says, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Yaakov, is this the way to answer an aggrieved person? Meaning, is that how you talk to someone who's in pain? What was his patch? Your children, the Midrash says, your children, by other wives, are destined to stand humbly before her son, Yosef. And the whole story, that's a reference to the story of when the Shvatim, the 11 sons of Yaakov, bowed down in front of Yosef. So that was sort of like his punishment. You can't be cruel to a person who's in pain like that. Okay.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
But Yosef, why is that a patch to him? If some of his children, they're all
Bow down
children.
to right. Well, it's a I guess it's a didactic moment for the Midrash.
I guess I would
to say, yeah.
that there was this.
In other words,
the whole thing between his children, that could be a patch.
That they were fighting. In other words, to begin with, right.
So what is the word? When there's a fight or something, there's a word for it. This machlokas, something like
Machlokas, yeah, right.
So if they'd said that, I understand.
Right. Well, I think the idea is not only is sort of to admonish Yaakov, again from the Midrash, admonish Yaakov by saying, Rachel is deserving of some extra treatment because you mistreated her. In other words, it's a gift to Rachel that she deserves. Like, how when you have a child who's mistreated, or I don't know, you want to show them a little bit of special extra love. So you go over and give them a hug. Come here, mommy has a special hug for you. This is a special hug for Rachel because Yaakov was not so nice to her. That's basically how I read it. Okay. Then we have the episode of the Dudaim. The Dudaim is a very interesting little episode. So Reuven goes. Dudaim is the Hebrew phrase. Dudaim. Dudaim, and it's a plural noun, meaning that's typically how it's referred to even in English, because it has no translation that we can be confident in. The Dudaim are translated variously as mandrakes or jasmine. We don't exactly know what that plant is. It's some sort of plant of the field. It could be it's a weed of some kind. We don't know. Okay, so that's why it's just generally referred to as Hebrew form Dudaim. So Reuven, he's a small boy at this point. He's the first son of Leah. He goes out into the field and he finds these Dudaim. Now the Dudaim are known to have some sort of aphrodisiac elements to that. I don't want to say powers, but they're known to be some sort of aphrodisiac. They either have a nice aroma. There's tremendous argument in the Mefarshim back and forth as to if they actually had medicinal elements, qualities to them. Some say yes, some say no. But there was some understanding or perception that these plants were really very good for conception, for fertility. It was some sort of fertility, boon, something. And Reuven finds them. Now, the reason he finds them and brings them back to Leah's mother is because Leah had stopped giving birth. She had a few kids, and then it stopped, and she was not happy about this. She wanted to have more. So Reuven goes out and finds these Dudaim. He knows of their fertility qualities, of whatever that may be, and he brings them to his mother. Okay, so he wanted them for his mother because again he saw that she was grieving that she wasn't having children anymore, and Rachel sees them and she wants them. She is barren, right? She sees that Leah has so many children, and she says, let me have some of your dudaim, just some of them. Leah's not giving these up for nothing. She says, what are you going to give me? So they trade. Leah gives Rachel some of her dudaim in exchange for the opportunity to sleep with Yaakov that night. It was supposed to be Rachel's night with Yaakov, and she gives that up to Leah. Leah wants the opportunity to have Yaakov in her tent that night. Okay, so she traded a short-term goal, Rachel did, that night with Yaakov, for the long goal. The long goal in her mind was fertility. I want a child, and if this is a plant that might be an aphrodisiac or have fertility-inducing medicinal values, I want that opportunity. The Midrash does not look well on Rachel for this. You're on Rachel.
I think Leah was a jerk.
You think she was too greedy?
Her sister did so much for her, way beyond anybody could even
That's
imagine.
True. Right.
Here she has no children. Leah has children.
Right.
For goodness sakes, give her.
Right.
If you want all of them, Rachel, take them.
Right. Interesting. So Midrash talks about Rachel, says that Rabbi Eliezer says they both lost and they both gained. So Leah lost the dudaim, but she gained 2 tribes because that night that when she was with Yaakov, she conceived. Okay? And she also gained being buried with him. Because Rachel, because of this event, because of her actions, she lost the right to be buried with Yaakov.
But she just asked. She didn't demand. What's wrong with that?
No. Because the point is, how could she have given up an opportunity to be with Yaakov? That was the point, is that she made the wrong sacrifice here. It was the wrong decision. It was
Why was that such a big deal? That one night.
Because according to the Midrash, a person doesn't give up the right to be with a tzaddik. She shouldn't have given up that right. Yaakov, an opportunity to mate with, to possibly, conceive.
Well, then why was she praised? Because she originally gave up the right to be with the tzaddik when she let Leah.
Well, she didn't give up. She didn't give up the right. Right. She didn't really. It wasn't her doing. It was Lavan's doing the whole trickery thing. Right.
Wait a minute.
No, but she went with it.
She went with it. Right. She did. At that point, it was a sacrifice for her sister's sake.
But she, in the end, it was her doing. She did.
Yeah.
It.
No. Right. But
she
it was
gave the code.
Right. And it was
So
because
I just think that's a little bit odd.
Well, the sacrifice that she gave up for her, it was for her sister's well-being and her sister's, that she shouldn't be humiliated, right? So here she's not. What is she giving? She's giving up her opportunity. It wasn't, in other words, she's giving up her opportunity, but she had the long play in mind. The long goal was, I want children with Yaakov.
But
So
Leah
she felt
also knew that you don't give up an opportunity.
right, which is why she said, "That's what I'll exchange the dudaim for."
Yeah.
I want that opportunity.
Yeah, but she knew it was Rachel's opportunity, not hers.
Right.
She was
Right.
she was forcing Rachel. Of course, the weird is, why didn't Rachel just go out to the field and get her own duad?
Right.
Why'd she have to?
Right.
That's also very weird.
It's possible that they were a rare plant.
It
They're
must have been.
not
because that's just
yeah.
way too obvious.
Right.
But that argument, I think, breaks down a lot. That Leah also knew, give up a time.
Right.
And she is forcing her sister to do that so that her sister...
Well, she's offering the opportunity. Rachel could have said no.
then
Yaakov
she
is
gets
more
no
important
dudaim.
to me.
Then she doesn't get to do it.
Right.
I think Leah acted... I mean, there's something wrong there.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it at that. I don't have an answer for you. Again, the Medrash says they were. Rashi says Rachel is at fault. Rashi says Rachel is at fault. That's why she wasn't buried with him, because she gave up an opportunity. She made light of an opportunity to be with Yaakov. That was the wrong decision. So it's a matter of emotion in this case, clouding. Look, it happened earlier. Rachel came to Yaakov angry and threatening. I'm going to die if you don't give me children, right? And here again, she's making a decision. She's putting a certain amount of emotional weight in the wrong camp.
Right.
In the wrong camp, and that was a mistake on her part.
Wait a minute, what was in the wrong camp?
Rachel was putting her priorities were wrong. That's what Rashi says, that she should have prioritized being with Yaakov over fertility. A chance at, not even fertility, a chance at fertility. Chance at fertility, but you're not even, you want the Judaism because you want to conceive, but meanwhile you're giving up the opportunity to actually do the thing that will help you conceive.
Yeah.
It's kind of a backwards thing, but she put stock in those Judaism. Again, it was understood to be a powerful fertility aid. Okay. One more thing I want to talk about, which is I mentioned earlier, the Medrash talks about Leah as being associated with prayer. Tremendous amount of association with Leah with prayer. And the Midrash actually says, at the beginning of creation, there has never been anyone who thanked Hashem like Leah thanked Hashem. And this is in reference to when she has Yehuda, and she names him Yehuda, which means I now thank Hashem. So officially, she's like the instigator or the originator of gratitude, right? So you could say it's not even true even if you're saying in the Torah she was the first one to officially. It's not true. Eliezer himself, when he met Rivka, he bowed down in thanks to Hashem. So you can say, well, she was the first one to verbalize it. You could also say that there's a difference between Eliezer and Leah, in that Eliezer, when he was thanking Hashem, was sort of thanking Hashem for what was expected to come to Avraham in Avraham's merit. In other words, Avraham had merit, and thank you, Hashem, for bringing what you should have brought, in a way. And here Leah is saying, I totally didn't deserve this. She had already children, and she totally didn't deserve it. So she was thanking for something that she really thought she got more than she deserved. So a few times in this parsha, she is associated with prayer. The first time we mentioned when she's weeping and praying and actually averts the decree of her marrying Esav, right? The second time is when she is thanking Hashem for Yehuda. She says, this time I thank Hashem. The third time is very interesting.
Wait, what was the second?
Okay. The second is when she thanks Hashem for Yehuda, her son Yehuda.
I thought she changed the decree.
Oh, the weeping over Esav. Remember?
Was that number one?
That was number one.
Okay.
The second one is for Yehuda, her fourth son. And the third, what is so great about that?
No, what was the thinking that she was?
She didn't deserve a fourth. Why didn't she deserve a fourth, by the way? Why did she think she didn't deserve Yehuda? Because she did a little cheshbon. She did a little bit of a calculation here.
That was the deal with it.
No, but think about this. Yaakov had 4 wives. She knew, through Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, she knew that Yaakov was destined to have 12 tribes, 12 sons. So she figured 4 wives divided by 12 tribes means I'm going to have 3, and the others will have 3 each. That would be the normal way of things. And here she has her 4th child. So she's right away skewing the balance. And that's why she felt that she got more than was rightfully coming to her, or rightfully what she deserved, or what was going to be her allotment.
What was 3?
I didn't get to it yet. So the third one is very, very interesting. The pasuk says that it says Leah gave birth again, and and then it says so we're told that Rachel conceives, and then it says. And afterwards, Leah bore a daughter and called her name Dinah, right? And the word afterwards in the Midrash tells us, is interpreted, that what happened was that Leah and Rachel conceived at the same time, were pregnant at the same time, I guess. And Leah prayed. She said to herself like this. She was pregnant with Dinah. If I have another child, that's a son, right? Then Rachel may not be destined, because the other maids were also having children. Rachel may not be destined to have any of Yaakov's sons. So she prayed that the child in her womb turn into a girl, so that Rachel's child should be a boy. And that's what happened. That's what the Midrash says happened. That Leah gives birth to a daughter, and Rachel gives birth to son Yosef, and according to the Midrash, originally from Leah. In other words, this son was supposed to have been Leah's, and again, she changed a decree that turned her child, her in utero baby, into a girl, and Rachel's turned into a boy. So that's why Leah so we see tremendous love between the sisters. There's a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice in both of them. Right. So,
That's pretty good praying.
Right.
Change something.
Yes.
Pretty...
Again, teaching us the power of prayer, amazing power of prayer. So we're told that what is Leah's reward? That because of her expression of gratitude, she merited that her descendants, Yehuda and David from him, would exemplify themselves in the ability to confess. That was her reward, that because of her gratitude, her children merited that they had a tremendous ability to confess. So you might say, what is the connection between gratitude and confession? It's a good question, right? Why is confession, the ability to confess, why is that a sort of continuation of the trait or a reward for being grateful? So I saw an interesting commentary that said that, and it points out the fact that when you are grateful, what are you doing? You're acknowledging a truth. You're acknowledging the truth that Hashem is being kind to you, or something like that. When you're great, you're acknowledging the good, right? You're saying, I am aware of the fact that you have given me something, right? When you are confessing, it means you're recognizing you've sinned. So that both have forms of truth. Yeah. So both are about recognizing truth. It's about emes. It's about truth. That this quality is inherent in both, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the flip side.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was in, what were the two sons on that?
Yehuda and David, his descendant. King David. So I want can I just end on one more thing, or should we end here?
No,
so I want to just end on one thing. I mentioned very briefly how I talked about how Yaakov had sort of seen that Rachel was his mate, right? So the Art Scroll has a very interesting commentary before the Parsha. It talks about how why did Yaakov choose Rachel over Leah, right? Why did he love her better? So, because obviously Leah was meant to be his wife as well, right? But they talk about how there were different stages of Yaakov's life. And he chose Rachel, because Rachel was his fitting partner for this stage of his life. And then later, when he goes back to Eretz Yisrael, Leah is the fitting partner. So they talk about how Yaakov has two names, right? Yaakov is his first name, his given name. And then when he fights the angel in the next Parsha, his name is changed to Yisrael, right? So it's Yaakov and Yisrael. And they both represent two different concepts. So the first job that he had in life was to sort of serve Hashem in one way, and the second job was to serve Hashem in another way. The first job was to recognize this world as a separate entity from the heaven, but to utilize the world for Hashem's sake, right? So in other words, you're in this world. The first stage is the first level of spirituality. Is you're in this world. You realize these are my things, but I'm going to serve Hashem with them. You're utilizing the things of this world, the pleasures, their temptations, and you're giving yourself over, you're sacrificing your things for Hashem. Whereas the second level is, I realize nothing is mine. The first stage is Hashem's giving me these things and I'm using them. The second stage is Hashem owns them and I'm just the caretaker. So it's a little bit of a higher level, a spiritual level, right? It's a matter of saying, the second level would be a matter of saying, it's no sacrifice for me to do this because everything belongs to Hashem anyway. So with Yaakov, his time with Lavan was of this world, of the first stage, where he sacrificed everything he worked in this world. In other words, he made a lot of money for Lavan, right? He was a shepherd. He was dealing with the he was productive. He was making money. He was doing productive things. And Rachel represents this being of this world. She was a very sociable person. She was physically beautiful. She was visible. She was more visible. The Kabbalists actually say that Rachel is of this world, and Leah is of Rachel is of a what do they say? That Rachel is the world of speech. That she's the revealed world, whatever that means, and Leah is the hidden world of thought and prayer. And it's more of a hidden thing. So in this first stage of Yaakov's, of his being as existing, he needed Rachel as the one who is more noticeable and more social. He was in this world. He's sanctifying the material universe, and that's why he's attracted to her, because she represents that task in him. And then what happens? Notice after the 20 years are up, and when he goes back to Israel, Rachel dies. Right? She doesn't accompany him back in Eretz Yisrael. Leah is what he needs to continue that mission. I thought it was very interesting. Okay, and if you want, you can read it in there. Okay, so that is